My name is Tim Mullins. I nowadays live in New South Wales, but I was born and raised in Cork in Ireland, born in '49. I spent all my years, teenage, everything. I came out of this country, Australia, when I was 23. When I was young, teenager, young fellas, you're the same as ever. Everybody does the same thing. They play ball or whatever they do around the place and run around, do stupid things like you do. And then, and in my teens, I used to do a lot of youth hosteling. And when I was about 16 and a half, I think it was, I hitchhiked around Scotland for 2 weeks. A friend of mine, another apprentice in another printing place, the two of us decided we'd go on a hitchhiking holiday. So we hitched up from the south coast of Ireland all the way to Belfast, crossed over by the ferry, hitchhiked around Scotland, and did the same all the way back. And then in 1972, I came to Australia. Now, well, yeah, and one of the boys said, I'm going to go to New Zealand. And I said, oh yeah, really? And the rest, like there was 4 or 5 of us hanging around together. We said, oh, we're going to go, we'll go, I'll go. And then the next week, the original day became, instead of New Zealand, became Australia. And then it whittled down to the guy that came up there couldn't go because he was the main breadwinner for his family, and he was the oldest as well. So then it whittled down to 2 of us, and then it whittled down to me, and I said, fuck it, I'm going. I go for a look. So and then I was serving my apprenticeship with another comp, Freddie, who now lives in Western Australia in Perth, and he's lived there since, well, as long as I have. Maybe 6 months short than I have. He's been in Australia. And then he said, oh, can I go with you? I said, oh yeah, you can if you want. Anyway, so he got assisted passage. I didn't, so I paid my fare, and he got flown out by the government. So, but because I paid my fare, the way I came is I came what they used to call shipjet. So I flew to Singapore, which in those days you had to stop 3 times before you got to Singapore. And then you got a ship from Singapore to Fremantle. And that was the cheapest way you could get to Australia. And so, prior to the 1st of January 1975, people from the British Isles got into Australia without a visa. And you became a permanent resident as soon as you stepped on the land. So, all I had to do was I had to come here, I had to carry a chest x-ray and a passport card. And that was it. You were a permanent resident. There you go. You're a permanent resident. Welcome to Australia. Fuck. Anyway, I remember one thing though. The first thing Ronnie, who's my cousin's fiancé, said to me when I arrived, he said, no, the first thing you have to do is get private health insurance. I said, why? What's private health insurance? Never heard of it in my life. So I went out and got private health insurance, which was HPF, it was called in Western Australia. And that was the start of my Australian adventure. Yeah. Then I moved in with Ronnie and his brother and Freddie, and we had a house, the 4 of us had a house together. And then we met up with some Southampton fellas. Freddie decided to go back for a while, and another Irish fellow moved in with us, Sean. Sean had come out by ship, again with assisted passage, but he got sick on the ship, and he got an infection in his lung. They gave him antibiotics, but he was allergic to them. Anyway, when they took him off from Fremantle, they actually had to take the lung, so he only had 1 lung. And he's got a fabulous singing voice. And that's what he made his living for the last 40, 50 years, singing.
As you put it in, only having 1 lung?
No, he always had a great voice, but with 1 lung, it didn't seem to impact on the actual strength and quality of it. It was amazing.
When summertime is blooming and the air is filled with perfume, I walk in time forgotten with my bonny belle of Broughton. Though now your hair is silver, your beauty's gone forever, I have not forgotten you were my bonny belle of Broughton.
So with his sickness, that had nothing to do with TB or anything like that?
No. He was every night in the ship. You got what is it, 4 to 6 weeks on the ship. He'd been out sleeping on the deck, drunk every night and what have you. And what do you think's going to happen? So he's cut something, and whatever it did, it infected his lung. I don't know. So in the end, at that house, there was Ronnie Ken, who's Ronnie's brother, and Sean and I. And Sean and I used to hang around with this, the guys from Southampton. And we used to go to lots of parties on the weekend. So this weekend we did this party, and there was Andy and Phil, who were from Southampton, and Sean and I were on coming back that morning in the same car. I think Andy was driving. I think there was a Beetle. I think he had a Beetle, I'm sure. I mean, in the back. And we said, oh, this is rubbish. We need to do something different. And we said, oh, why don't we just do our own Australia trip? So he said, oh, that's a great idea. I'll be in it. I had the 4 of us were in it, definitely. So I driving back from this all-night party down Scarborough Beach Road, and there's all these car yards. And we said, oh, look, there's a van. Let's pull in there and let's have a look at these vans. So we had a look at this van, and we bought this combi van. Now, we've been drinking all night, so we really shouldn't have been in the car and in the first place. We bought this combi van, 6-fold combi van, with 4 of us sharing it. So Andy put a sort of cupboard behind the front seats, and then we put, I think it was a piece of wood across the back motor, so to screw the thing, and we had these big planks, or not planks, sheets, which we just stuck from there to there, and the whole back was a flat area which we just slept in our sleeping bags and that. And I think Ronnie actually put lino on everything, so we had lino to try and soften the bones. And so that was a thing, and then we decided, we walked out roughly when we were leaving, but the date came and went and went and went and went, because we kept going to meeting people we were saying goodbye to, and we'd spend the whole day then in the pub, or somebody said, let's go back, we'll have a barbecue, or all this sort of stuff went on and on. And in the end we decided we've got to get out of town, we've got to get in the car. So one day, it was about, it would have been 12, 1 o'clock or something, we chucked ourselves into the combi van, stole all the pots and pans out of the house, and away we went. So we started off, we went up the west coast, we had no problems really, we were going well. We left sometime in May, I couldn't tell her, on the 12th or something, 14th of May or something. It was Sean's birthday, and we were outside Roebourne, so we decided we'd pull into the pub in Roebourne, and you know, we'd have a few drinks to celebrate Sean's birthday. We pulled into the Roebourne pub, and we got out and walked up to the pub, and we thought, shit, there's no windows in the front of it, just totally open, and loads full of Aboriginals in the front, and there was all these humpies around the place as well, all car wrecks and Aboriginals living in it. And we thought, shit, I don't think we should stay here tonight, I'm not going to sleep down there on the side of the roads. So we bought a load of, I think it was cider, we stocked up on cider, and away we went up the road somewhere. And we sat there with the old lantern, the old butane lantern thing, on the middle, inside, on in the van, sat around and drank our cider and went to bed, and that's it. And when we started off again the next day. The next place I could think of was Broome. Our combi was 6-fold combi, so you could, like, you hold your hand out in front of it like that, and you couldn't see it at night because there's no power in a 6-volt battery. You're running the motor and you're trying to have headlights on. So we're driving along, and the car starts spluttering and splattering and backfiring. We thought, oh no. And we're in the middle of nowhere, and in those days there was a dirt track, and it was the middle of nowhere. There was no traffic, nothing. So we're driving along, and he says, well, what are we going to do? And we said, well, we'll just drive till we have to stop, and we fill her up with petrol. So away we went, and we're flying along, and it's spluttering and flattering and what have you, and away we go. And we come to this curve, and we get across the road was a string of cattle. And Andy says, I'm going for the biggest gap, so hold on to your seats. So he went for the biggest gap, but it wasn't big enough. So he hit this cow in the arse and kept going, and we kept going and kept going to run out of fuel. Whenever we ran out of fuel out there, I can't remember how long. Anyway, we get out and we thought, we filled her up with fuel. We had the extra fuel. You had to, because it was too far in between filling up, you had to have extra fuel. So we fill up the car and nothing happens. Oh shit. I said, well, we just have to wait till the morning, so hopefully somebody comes along. And we're sitting there for a few hours, and all of a sudden we saw these lights coming. miles away. You could see it from miles because there was nothing out there.
Traveling in a fried-out combi on a hippie trailhead full of zombies.
And you come screaming along. I'd say at this stage we were probably about 30, 40 miles out of Broome, south of Broome, somewhere in there, in the middle of nowhere. And this guy, we were waiting, and he pulled up. It was an old fella that had walked. It was an old fella. He wasn't old. He was a young fella. He'd been working on the station for the last month, and he's on a weekend to town. He was ready to go, all ready to go. And he stopped. And he said, "Well, quick, here, get the rope on, and we'll pull you along." So away he goes. He gets the rope, and he says, "Now, I'm going to stay in the van because somebody's got to steer the van." I said, "Well, I'll stay in with you." And the other two boys, Sean and Phil, went in the Land Rover. He meant to go off like a rocket. Anyway, he's flying along, and the main road up there in those days, the track, we call it a track really. Broome was off to the left, like in on the sea where the road went up around it. So there's a turn off, and your man screaming along, and then he goes left. And of course, with our 6-volt headlights, we could hardly see him in front of us. And he went left, and we missed the turn, and we went straight on. So we ended up in the bush, and he ended up coming back to. Anyway, he towed us into Broome. None of us were injured. Everybody was grand. And so we stepped in the van, got up next morning, and just went to the garage. Said, "Look, we're having problems with our van." He said, "What's the problem?" We said, he said, that's a new motor. You need a new motor, a short motor or something. He said, "What?" He said, we said, "How long will that take?" He said, "It's got to come from Perth." We said, "Yeah, it'll take a week." A week? I'm going to be stuck in Broome for a week. And Broome was a non-event in those days. There was nothing there really, a small little town. So then we discovered there was a second garage in town, so we went to the second garage, and that guy said, "Well, there's a guy that works there, but he only comes in like late in the morning. He does only about half a day, but he knows a bit about Volkswagen. So you want to come back at 10 or 11, I can't remember what time it was, he'll be here. We have a chat with him." So we went for a walk around and look at all these streets with Japanese names and English underneath them and all that sort of stuff. And then we had a chat with this fella, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I know that. I think I know what that would be." He said, "Bring it round." So we pushed it round to the other garage, and he took off the distributor, got out the points. He said, "Oh yeah, I can see what it is." So for a set of points, we were stranded in the middle of nowhere, which we didn't have spare points. I think we did actually, but we didn't realise what it was. But we didn't know it. None of us were mechanics. That's right. I mean, we could do something, but yeah. So the next day we headed off for Darwin again. And then we came to the border of the Northern Territory, and there's beautiful sealed roads. Like, you wouldn't believe, you come out of this shithole from Western Australia on this dirt track, and then there's this lovely sealed road in the middle of nowhere. You just stayed, and start. So away we gone. We came to our first pub in Northern Territory, and we decided we should have a few drinks. So we got to the Northern Territory, and then that was it. So for the night, so we then drove up the road a few yards and pulled in somewhere to sleep. And we drank Foster's, and that was the worst hangover I ever had in my life. I don't think I've drunk Foster since. The next day we arrived in Darwin. I think we arrived fairly early, and not early, but 9ish, 10 o'clock in the morning, before lunch anyway. And so we decided we'd go to the Common Employers Service, look for jobs. And I walked in, and each of us gets interviewed individually, and they said, "What do you do, and have you got a trade?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What are you?" I said, "I'm a compositor." He said, "Here you go, just go down and see this fella in the newspaper." And I said, "What?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What happens here is, at the start of the wet, they all go out, all these foreigners that come in and disappear, and a whole new load comes in then at the dry season again, all coming from Europe and what have you." So I went down there, and the three boys decided they were going to work on what was then the site of the Darwin Hospital when they first started building it. So they were going out there, these shuttering and for concrete pours and all that stuff. And I said, no, I'm not going to go into the nice, easy, I'm not going to standing in the muck and shit and get rained off every second day. So I went to work in the newspaper. After a week on days, they put me on nights, and I was on nights for the rest of it till I left. I worked at the NT News, which is Murdoch's Craic. And
It's a great newspaper though. Never let the truth get in the way of a good
I know,
story.
that's Murdoch's papers all over. The boys stayed at the building site, and the hardest part in Darwin when we got there was trying to get a flat. We couldn't get a flat because we were 4 single fellas, so we stayed at the campsite where we met another few. We met Mick there. Sean then left, and he went and stayed in the caravan with 2 other fellas, and then he just went out on prawn boats. He went prawn fishing. So the 3 of us moved on. We got a flat out in a place called Moyle, I think it was. It was way out in the middle. It was miles out of Darwin. Taxis wouldn't even go there. And to get a taxi, you'd be waiting like till somebody came out. I don't know, it'd be an hour or 2 hours, and there's no other way of getting in. And Phil, the bastard, used to always, if he ordered a taxi, he'd say Mullins for Mr. Mullins, which is me. And if something else came along, he'd hop it, and then my name would be shit. Phil. So we stayed out there for a while, and then we got another flat. They were owned by Greeks, and it was like a load of like villas, I suppose. There must have been 6 or 8 of them, and the owners lived up one of them. And then they accused us one day of stealing his wife's knickers, and she was not. You don't steal knickers.
You might have needed it for a kicking.
You might need it for a parachute, but you know. Anyway, we decided we'd move. So just before Christmas, we got another flat, and that's where we stayed. I used to cycle to work. I got my license from there, and I think Sean got a license there too.
You still got the combi at this stage?
Oh yeah, I still had the combi. And then I used to cycle to work, cycle home at night, and I used to finish about 2, I think of it. So therefore, that was it, and we stayed there, and then Christmas Eve turned up. So I went in town because there was the work splits up, and somebody said, "Did you hear about the cyclone coming?" I said, "Oh, is there one coming in?" I said, "Yeah, well, you know, it was just it was a cyclone, you know? Big deal." So I had a few drinks, and then I was supposed to meet the fellas I was sharing with up in Smith Street, which is the main street, but it's a bloody long street, and up at the far end of it. So after being in the pub with the work fellas, then I said to find the others. And at this stage now, it was starting to rain, and the wind was coming, and I mean buckets, just buckets. So I got a taxi, up to the top of town, and I went to this house. I said, what? I wasn't sure of the number. I knew the street, but no number. And there was about 3 parties, and in about 6 or 7 houses, there was 3 or 4 parties going. So I went to every party. And I couldn't find anybody I knew, so I thought I'll go back. So I go home, and they're all sitting around the table drinking quietly, having a nice time. Another couple of friends. So that was that, and then they went, and then we all went off to bed.
Make sure your communications are secure. Check your transistor radio and spare batteries. Keep tuned to radio or television news broadcasts. Anything on your property that could be a wind-borne missile, including rubbish tins, outdoor furniture, dead branches, toys and tools, should be anchored or taken inside. Store drinking water in bathtubs and bottles, and check emergency supplies and tools. You may also need water for firefighting. See if neighbours need help. Lock up pets. When a cyclone comes, remain calm and stay inside. Keep a window open on the side away from the wind, and remember, if the wind drops suddenly, the calm eye of the cyclone is probably overhead, as the winds will soon resume.
And then there was a bang, bang, bang at the back door, and we were in a block of flats, 2 above, 2 below. We were in one of the below ones. From the up, just above us come down, there was a Timurese couple and I think her brother. 3 of them knocking at the door. She had a massive cut here, and there was ranting and raving about the roof going off or something like that. I mean, you couldn't see anything. There was no power. Everything was gone. So we said, all right. So they came in, and then not long after that, our front windows came in. One side of the front windows came in.
On Christmas Eve 1974, Darwin was hit by one of the worst natural disasters in our recorded history, Cyclone Tracy. For 3 hours, howling winds pounded the city at speeds estimated at more than 250 kilometres an hour.
But I forgot to say before that, actually, is there was only a friend of the Southampton boys, another one of their pals that I went to school with, had come overland from England. And as I said, in those days, you come all the way through Afghanistan, Iran, no problems, by car or whatever you want to do. The only place you couldn't cross was Burma. You had to get around Burma, but everywhere else you could go overland all the way. So he ended up coming down through Indonesia, into Timor, and then he flew from Delhi into Darwin, and then he came and stayed with us. This is about a week before Christmas. And at that time, there was loads of people coming from Europe, because from the 1st of January 1975, they had to have a visa. Before that, you didn't have to have a visa, so they were all coming in on visas, and the places were getting packed. So he came and stayed with us, and the night of the Christmas Eve, Sean turns up. He says, I know. I said, what are you doing here? He says, oh, well, I know. The captain wants us to go to sea with the prawn boat. I'm not going on the prawn boat on this ship. He told him to stick his job, and I left. So there was 5 of us in the flat. And then that same day when I go home, Mick had turned up. He'd been in Sydney, this English fella. He'd come up, and I don't know how he got our address, but he was at our place, so he was staying the night too. So there was actually 6 of us there that night in the flat. And then there was the 3 from upstairs, so there was 9 of us. And what happened is we had a 2-bedroom flat. We had a large bedroom in the front, and we had a smaller bedroom in the back. We had a very small bedroom. We all went into the small back bedroom, and we closed the door, and we tried to close. We couldn't actually close the door because of the wind, and there was about maybe 2 inches of water all the way across the floor. And the trouble is, it's pitch black. You don't know whether it's the creek that's come up or it's the rain, but it was the rain actually. And that was the rain, just belted through all night, and we sat there all night, and the Timorese fellow with his wife, they actually slotted themselves into a wardrobe, like a built-in sort of thing. And she was cut to the bone when I was flying glass or whatever it was, and that's where we stayed till it got lights on. And when it got lights on, then you look out and you're cursing the bastard that built our place, because you don't know what's happening anywhere else, but actually every other place was worse.
I was outside the Dawn Hotel, mate. Well, it got up to about over 100 miles an hour, probably, I suppose, and I heard a woman yelling in a room, and I went out of the kitchen to see what was going on, and about 200-300 ton of iron just landed in the bloody swimming pool.
Somebody said, I prayed all night. I prayed the whole time. And I said, well, I think we didn't start praying soon enough.
And went into the street, but it was just a dirty grey. Your man couldn't see where he was going. And there were sheets of iron and bits of wood flying all over the place, so I said, well, the best thing I can do is to go back into the kitchen and the pub.
Doris Pengelly was 13 when Tracy struck.
We got up at 5 or 6 in the morning and went outside when everything was dead silent. And the sun was slowly coming up, and just looking around and not hearing a bird sing, not a dog barking, nothing, and not seeing anybody. And you could just see for miles and miles. I really thought, this is it, we're alone.
Seven out of 10 houses were destroyed, and almost all the rest was seriously damaged.
The kids had gone to bed all looking forward to Father Christmas coming, but we told them no chance. And then we got them in the lounge room under the table, and the ceiling started coming down. So we moved off into the bathroom. We hadn't been in there very long, and the roof went on one of the walls. I told you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The wall went from the bathroom, and the eldest daughter got hit with a hand basin as they were going out, but she's all right, because it was only a slight case of concussion. She's still suffering a bit from it. And we were sat in what was remained of the bathroom for about an hour and a half. Tins blowing everywhere. There were about 4 inches of water in the bathroom. And when the eye came, I went out to see what was left of the house. And the main bedroom had gone, the living room had gone. So we decided there was no point staying there, because with the wind turning in a different direction after the eye, we'd have got it all in the face. The wife and 3 children. They're going down to the wife, the family going down to Perth now with got some friends down there. Hoping they can put them up.
You haven't been able to contact your friends?
No, there's no way to get contact out of there.
Thanks again for your help.
That's all right.
Well, it's just a bloody disaster, that's all it is. It's just, I mean, you could not describe in words to anybody anywhere that have to come and see for themselves. It's just not possible to describe it.
We had some wood stuff. We slept on the floor anyway, because everything was soaking. And it was freezing cold the next morning as well. It felt freezing cold anyway. So you get out in the morning and it's dead quiet. Like the eye of the storm passed over as well, so it got quiet. Sometime in all that it got dead quiet, and then it started again. But the noise was horrendous, like an express train in the house. Just noise, and bang, bang, bang. So this went on, and then get out the next morning, and it's quiet. There's not a bird, there's not a breath of air, there's not a leaf on a tree. Every light poles, which they were steel, are like that, like at right angles to the ground. They were turned right over. And then you look up, and upstairs, there's no roof. There's nothing but 4 walls, and everything else is empty. Everything else gone out the window, out through the roof, wherever it went. And that was it. And across the front of the flat were all the power lines. Like, we come out the front door, there was a bit of a balcony, and then there were steps down, and they were across that. So, and we sort of cleaned it up a bit. We put all these boards up against the windows that were gone, and we made a sign and hung it up, and that's the one you see that went in one of the magazines. It was on, I think it was on the ABC as well, you say. The only thing we did think about is as soon as we got out the next day, we filled every container we could find with water. But we didn't know if the water would be cut off or what happened with the water. So we made sure we had water. And also we are set up for Christmas Day because we're going to the folk club and all that sort of scene, that we're going to visit a guy's house. We had the beer, they had the turkey and everything else. So we had a fridge full of beer.
That's Christmas.
So we had the fridge full of beer, and then I think they buried the turkey. There was no beer left, I know, when we left. What was funny is the brick houses, they seemed to blow up, like explode. They seemed to, once they got in and lifted the roof, the walls just seemed to blow out. A lot of the other ones, like the ones up on platform, some of all that was left was the platform, there was nothing else. And other ones, like half the house would be blown off and half of it is still there. but it was pretty rough. The place was pretty flattened. Like the friend who had the turkey, he lost one of his gable ends, but the next day they all got up and put it up and stayed up till they got somebody to come and fix it properly. That's all that happened. And his house was up in stilts. So like some places got off it, no problem. Some others got devastated. Like, you know, there's a picture there of a little kid on Christmas Day going into our place. He's from next door, and their place was flattened. But his mother was pregnant, and she had a baby that day. She was taken off the hospital that morning. She had the baby on Christmas Day.
Little girl called her Tracy.
I don't know what it was. I can't remember. I don't remember anything. It's just that it was one of the things. The only thing that did happen is Andy got cut. Andy got a bit of flying glass, and it cut him just under the ear there, just in there. It wasn't bad, but that was about the only injury we had, all of us. And then after that, we waited till they said they evacuated all the women and kids. And then they said, any single man or whoever wants to go. So we went up to the airport and stayed there for a few hours, and they put us on an Air Force plane, and we flew from Hercules to Adelaide. And all we were allowed to take one case, or one small case. So 3 of us had guitars. So we took the strings off the guitars and stuffed whatever clothes we could into the guitar. And that's how we came out with our guitars full of, and around the guitar and the case. That was our sum total of what we got out with. Everything else. Oh, what I forgot to say too is prior to this cyclone, the weekend before, because I work nights, but the boys used to go out on the booze almost every night, 4 nights a week. So they went to this party, and they decided to have a competition. Who could, in those days, wine was in a flagon, a big flagon, glass flagon. And they had a competition to see who could drink the flagon the quickest, 4 or 5 of them. And they drank the flagons, whatever it was. And on the way home, the combi van, in the old combi van, the front wheels were narrower than the back. So if you touched something with the front wheels, she flipped. So they didn't take a corner properly, touched the curb, and over she went. So the actual combi van that we went to go on, was supposed to go around Australia, ended up in a garage in Darwin. And it was there when the cyclone struck. And it had a big rhubarb, and the cyclone picked the car up and slammed it into something else. And we couldn't get it back. And the garage was gone. There was cars all over the place there. I went on my bike to get, because my driver's license was still in the combi van. And I got to the combi van to get my license. The garage was wide open, anybody could take anything. And I'm looking on the roof, and there's spaghetti everywhere.
Spaghetti?
Well, when the van rolled, they'd been eating spaghetti, somebody spewed, and there was spaghetti stuck all over them. There was 4 or 5 of them inside it. So then we ended up in Adelaide after the cyclone, and Sean and I stuck together, and Phil and Jake stuck together, and we got separated because Sean had a bit of glass in his foot, and the nurse couldn't get her out, so I got a scalpel and I got her out, so I got her out. So then they put us on a bus, and we ended up, I think there's an Air Force base somewhere in Adelaide, I don't know where it was. I know it was grand. We slept. They fed us, and then we got a bed for the night. We slept, and the other 2 boys went to an army barracks on the other side of Adelaide somewhere. And we'd had no contact with them. There's pre-mobile phones and all that sort of rubbish. Nobody knew where anybody was. So the next day, Sean and I, they said, look, he'll be flying out at 6 o'clock that night, whatever it was. So we thought, well, there must be a pub close to here. So we went to this pub in Adelaide. And we didn't know where, what suburb, I can't remember anything. And we go to this pub, and we walk, and we're sitting down, and we had T-shirts in Darwin Folk Club or something. And this fella goes like, Sean, what are you doing here? He said, oh, what are you doing here? He said, I'm on holidays. He said, I'd just been coming out from Darwin. What, were you in the cycle? He said, it was the engineer of the prawn boat that he used to work on, who'd went on holidays before the cyclones. He was down south, that's what a lot of them did. And he gave Sean $100, and that was a lot of money in 1974. And then we didn't buy a drink all day. Everybody was very, very generous. And of course, we got on the plane that night, pissed as farts. I think it was Ansett or something. They flew us to Perth. And we arrived in Perth, and it was New Year's, midnight New Year's Eve when we got off the plane. They were all dancing around and carrying on and what have you. And then they put us in a taxi and I went to my aunt's place. And that was the end of our round Australia trip.
Oh, the sun, it beats down from a merciless sky, and the rocks date into our feet. Oh, the work's very hard, but there's never a break for unfortunate men such as me. Me crime cost a shilling and sixpence to mend, but it sent me away o'er the sea. And now I must spend out the rest of my days in this land that means nothing to me. And oft times I think about and my cottage a lifetime away. Though I'm chained here and bound, my heart can't be found in this prison on Fremantle Bay.